someone now. We're going to combine him. He's an actor, he's a singer, and this is something we're really going to talk about. He's a social worker out there in our community, working with our youth. And we're going to talk about how all that arts and working in the community and social, how does he combine all this stuff? So I want to welcome my audience to having my guest today. His name is Mark Tomsic. And Mark, he is an actor, a singer, as I said, and a social worker. Mark, welcome. So let's talk all things art.
Thank you for having me. And I wanted to give you a compliment really quick. So as you remember, I saw you in Ariel Wiles' show recently for Clash of Colors, which was an incredibly moving play. I was really blown away by the writing, and it was so fun to see you in the show. I didn't know you were going to be in it. And so when I saw you, it was a really pleasant surprise. And I just thought you and the whole cast did so good. And it was a really engaging, thought-provoking show. And there was, there were a lot of people in the audience that were just crying. And because there were so many really devastating moments in the show. And then there were really touching moments as well. And I just wanted to say that I thought you and everybody did such an incredible job in that. And I'm really glad that I got to see it.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm sure Aria Wells will be so happy to hear your words. That was a 2-year project that she worked on writing and then getting it together and getting the cast together and everything. And I personally was also blessed to be in it because the only way I could be in it was to do the role that I did, because I was so involved with a lot of other things and didn't have actual time to rehearse like with the cast. I had to rehearse outside of the cast on my own, which is real terrifying, and to show up at Tech Week and it's like, hi, everybody, and try to fit in. So it was a great experience for me too. And thank you so much for coming for that. So, but now let's talk about you, Mr. Mark Tomsic. And before we talk about the works that, especially the one that I just saw you in, called You Can't Take It With You, let's talk first and let the audience know a little bit about you, Mark. How did you become a singer and find yourself in the theater world first? And then we're going to talk about how that, and if you use that in your social work field.
Yeah, I was a very dramatic child from the very beginning. And my grandmother, who was very much like my second mother, really encouraged the dramatic side. I was always like watching TV and movies, and I would memorize the lines and I'd repeat all these scenes to her, and God love her, she humored me. I'm sure I was the most obnoxious child in the world, but yeah, I think it was 10th grade in high school, and I started doing plays, and I was very shy, was very nervous, and I got cast in a lead role my first show, and I didn't expect that because I was so cripplingly shy. And but then theater, after I got used to it and I got more practice, I found myself a lot more comfortable, and theater allowed me to be comfortable in my own skin and also share something with other people that it felt nice to belong and work with people who I had things in common with. And so I would do a couple plays in high school, and then I didn't do theater for about 12 years until summer of 2021. And because I would pursue a career in social work.
Talk with us about how important it is, and it was for you, being a shy person in the 10th grade, to actually be able to use theater, because a lot of people don't understand that people who are in the theater or in any kind of entertainment, sometimes they think that we're not shy. and that we're all happy-go-lucky and love to be around people and interact and be the center of the stage, when actually it's not true. There are several of us, myself including, who are very shy and use this as a means. It helps me. Talk about how that was helpful to you as a teenager, to start using theater as a way to express yourself.
Yeah. I, at a very young age, loved to make people laugh. I knew that that was something that I could do. And when I started realizing that I could, in some ways, use that as a way to, in the theater and plays, I was like, I just wouldn't tell jokes and make a fool of myself and whatever. And then when I realized, I was like, oh, I could actually do a play where I make people laugh on a whole different level. That was really cool and exciting to me. But I was so scared because I didn't know how everything worked. I was around all these really talented people, even in high school, and I felt very insecure and embarrassed, and I didn't think I belonged. And it was so nice once I could get past that awkward stage of self-doubt and anxiety. I could really, let my hair down and really have fun with it. And I think that something I learned at a really young age was I put like these unrealistic expectations on myself, where I thought I had to be the best at what I was doing right away. And I think no matter how talented you aren't going to be the best at what you're doing, no matter what. It's a bunch of trial and error. You have to be able to take feedback and learn from that. And it's not personal. And I think that was something that I had to learn. And because I wanted to be good, and it's just not how it works. So but I definitely felt like theater gave me this out where I could kind of be silly and goofy and over the top, and people would appreciate that. And it wasn't like, weird when I was doing it in a show, if that makes sense. Like if I was doing it just with my friends, they might look at me and think I was like the biggest weirdo in the room, but theater gave me that comfort of knowing that it was okay to make a fool of myself because we were all doing it.
Talk to us with how are you able to use your past experience, because you're working at the Buckeye Ranch, working with at-risk teenagers, and in a residential setting. And I have a background in residential settings and working with people with developmental disabilities. And I was a state certified chemical dependency counselor. And so, and some of those people were at risk, teenagers who at one time was at risk and then became, adults. Talk to us. Are you able to use your skills as a comedian and social worker? Are you able to intertwine that to help these at-risk teenagers? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So funny enough, I knew I wanted to go into social work when I was actually in 10th grade. And that's what I would do. And I didn't have any family that was in this career. It was something that I wanted to do. I knew growing up in a fairly dysfunctional family, I wanted to help people in a way that I maybe wish that people could have helped me. And I felt like I had an understanding of what some of the things that people were going through, especially people around my age. And I think theater in some ways has helped me in my social work profession because I am so animated, because I am so comfortable in my skin now, and I'm very attuned to emotions, whether they're visibly noticeable or brewing underneath of the surface. I feel like that I can use some of my, I guess, some of my skill to relate to people that I work with. Something that I've learned, and you're probably familiar with this, is something we call trauma-informed care. And with that, there's not one solution to helping somebody with a problem, and that one approach might not work for another person. And so I found that I can kind of, I guess I find that I can kind of use different pieces of my personality to better fit certain clientele that I work with. I might be very bubbly and goofy and silly with one client because that's how they take information better if I present it that way. And then there's some where they really want you to be very bold and honest and not sugarcoat. I hear that so much. Don't sugarcoat. And so there, I can kind of play to that. And I think with theater, we're always playing these different characters. And I think in some ways in my social profession, it sounds weird to say this, but in some ways I do feel like I'm playing all these different characters when I'm working with the teenagers that I work with. And I find that because I am so unapologetically myself, the teenagers that I work with are drawn to me because there's a confidence that I think I exude, not because I think that I'm amazing at everything that I do. I'm just comfortable in my own skin. And I think teenagers see that and they're like, well, I want to be like that. I want to feel, proud of myself and not feel ashamed. In teenagers, that's that awkward stage. So, because I never really saw myself as a confident person. But I think it's something I've grown into as I've gotten older and had more experience. So I would say that theater has allowed me to play to my strengths, whether it's on stage or even with the kids that I work with. And I think that because I put so much emphasis in building relationships with people, because I think relationships matter. And because of that, I feel like I work better with the kids that I treat because, they feel like I see things about them, that I notice the little things. And in some ways, I kind of apply that in theater as well. I'm very much a relationship focused person. And so when I'm in a play, I'm like, I feel like this mother hen over here trying to make sure everybody's props are where they need to be and like informal stage managing. And I'm just always like cheering everybody on because I love doing that. I love to see the best in people. And I think that people do their best when they feel like somebody sees it and says it. And I think people don't, and I don't even think people mean to. I think sometimes people don't remember to tell people what they're doing right.
Yeah, that's really good. And, one of the things you said, which is so important, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, that's why they'll say to you in a minute, like, don't sugarcoat this stuff with me. Because, as far as they can say, look, my life, you don't have to do that. Be honest.
Yeah.
Tell me what's up, because as far as they're concerned, I've already lived this. I don't sugarcoat it. They want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. And they want to be treated as a person that can, a thinking, emotional human being. So and I like what you said about how you're able to adjust to each person's, because that is such a key, not just for the teams that you're working with, but like in the schools, teachers, you need to adjust to the different personalities, which leads into, they become teenagers. You got to adjust to this mood now, because that's a whole nother level. And even when we now, like you said, working in the theater with adults. And so basically, no matter who we are interacting with, we have to try to come to people on their level. So that's what I'm getting from what you're saying. For me, that's what I'm hearing is we must try to get just get with people where they are, you know, on their level, in order to help with relationship building between you two. You know, that's what I use. I was always very straight with people. I was like you know, like, and another thing you said, Mark, that is very important. You got comfortable with yourself, because that's the key. Okay, is being comfortable with yourself and being a young, awkward person. I started, for example, you said, well, I always knew I wanted to be a social worker, right? You always knew you wanted to work with people. And it's tied into what we ourselves are experiencing and what we want to do. See? Because I had the so dysfunctional family, all that stuff too, as a teenager. So I already knew coming out, I'm going to work with people because I want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off on the suicide prevention hotline because I was suicidal a lot. You know what I mean? And so at
Yeah.
19 years old, I decided, like, okay, I have to do something. I had to do something. And so I started working on the suicide prevention hotline. I could do that anonymously, you know, helping people. And then I find out, as we find out, you probably found out too, Mark. Sometimes our situation we think is so bad and all that, and then we hear somebody else's story. And then when we hear somebody else's story, it either shocks us out of, okay, hey, hold on a minute. If this teenager going through this and can make it and still be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who am I? I gotta be here and make it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's really great. Especially, let me say this, it's really great you being a male, because there's not a lot of male role models in the social worker field. And that's so important because you're dealing with male teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what you know, talk about that, because you know what I'm saying? You and I know that when it comes to that field, working with people, meta stuff, there's, you know, the women out, the males are like, where's the man?
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding
Yeah.
that?
So just to give a little context, over at Buckeye Ranch, I work over in the Grove City location, as you said earlier, in a residential setting. So that means that they live there. And our program is between 3 to 9 months. That can always change, but that's usually the approximate time. And usually these kids range between 10 and 17 years old. And there are about 8 different units or houses, whatever you'd like to call them. And they're broken up by different histories, different backgrounds. And I think for a long time, I worked as a clinician. And so I did individual counseling and family therapy and group therapy. And I did that for several years. And it was some of the most rewarding time of my life, but it was also some of the most devastating time of my life, because hearing these stories, it's heartbreaking, and you want to help, but after a while you hear these stories, it really starts to wear on you. And I didn't realize how affected I had been. I was so I was so engulfed in all of these things that the kids were telling me and that I was trying to help them through. And I didn't realize how it had changed me after a while. And I learned that when people were coming up to me and telling me that I didn't seem the same anymore. And I mean, like, I had 20 different people within the span of several months tell me that my whole personality had changed, that I seemed more lethargic, and that I didn't have the same spark that I used to have. And so it really opened my eyes, the what burnout looks like, and how you don't even realize that you're burned out, because you're just trying to get through it. And so when I stepped down and I became what I am now as a group therapist, so I strictly focus on skill building, life skills, anger management, problem solving, teaching, regulating, and coping skills, things like that. It couldn't have been like that was the best decision I could have made for my mental health. And I still do that, and it's really fun. I love teaching kids how to do things that, you know, every adult should know how to do. Just recently, I just finished a group series where I was teaching the group of kids on how to make breakfast, and then the next was lunch, and then dinner, and then a dessert. And they had to compete against each other on teams, and they would have to focus on presentation, taste, and then how well they worked with their partners. And we would all be, and I would always warn them, like, the adults in the room are going to give their feedback. So just know that they might say some good things, they might say some things you need to work on. And it really was so rewarding seeing how well they responded to that. I even got to show these teenagers how to cut onions and green peppers, and you know, because they didn't know how to do those things. It really opened my eyes. I had forgotten some of these teenagers, 15, 16, 17, didn't know how to do some of the things that maybe we would think they need to know. And I would have conversations with adults that I work with at Buckeye Ranch where they would get so mad at the kids. Like they would say, like, they should just know this. They should know that that's wrong, or they should know that that's inappropriate, X, Y, and Z. And I had to have conversations with these people. And, you know, I was very respectful, but I said, you know, I think that while you might be right, you have to remember that most of these kids' background, if they're homeless, or their family was homeless, or they're suffering abuse, or they're going without basic needs, the last thing they're being taught is what's inappropriate. And they're just trying to survive. And that's not their fault. And we can't blame them for something that's not their fault. And the only thing you can do is be patient and teach them what you feel like they need to know without judgment. And I think that because that's just how I am, I really feel like it's important to listen to people without judgment and to consider that there's a reason or reasons for why most of the kids that we work with behave the way that they do. It didn't just come out of nowhere, and they probably have a justifiable reason for why they do what they do. And I think I work with a lot of adults and parents, and they're so frustrated with their kids, you know, like, why do they do this? Why do they act like that? And I would often tell them, I don't know if the answer is going to make you feel any better. You want an answer to something that I'm not sure what you think that answer is going to accomplish.
Because, you know, the bottom line is, let's just solve the problem. It's here. How do we fix that? Let's talk a little bit now about some of your favorite roles, okay, in theater. You have been in A Christmas Carol. That's the one you did when you was in a senior high school. Then you had that long 12 years of, you know, of getting yourself together as far as the world, the real world. I call it, where we got to pay bill world. You was in The Odd Couple, Dearly Departed, Arsenic and Old Lace. Oh man, that's a good one. Talk to us about, what was your favorite role since you've been back in the theater and acting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say one of my favorite roles would be playing Tony in You Can't Take It With You. I would say the reason was because our director, John Heisel, he really wanted to emphasize the relationship between Tony and his father, Mr. Kirby. And he felt like a lot of past productions just kind of gloss over the conflict between the two. And he really wanted the audience to feel the raw emotion, the pain that was what Tony was going through, and what his father was going through. And I think that when you really look past all of the surface level part of it, there's a deep meaning there. And it almost seems like there's this generational trauma there with the father who, it sounds like he was, his dreams were taken away from him by his own family. They didn't believe that he could accomplish the things that he wanted, and he had to go do something that was more, practical. And then and essentially, because his dreams have been crushed, he's projecting that onto his son. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So that was really powerful. I really I was really appreciative to that role. And like, I don't consider myself to be the most romantic person in the world. So playing this, in love young person, I was really intimidated by that because I didn't think I was going to do it justice. And I was so fortunate that the actress, her name is Molly, she was so warm and friendly and kind. And we had talked things out. She was always open to whatever. And we always had that mutual respect for each other. We'd always ask before we do anything, like, is this okay with you?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, if you had an intimacy coordinator or director, because that's so important, because you guys, with the scenes that you were doing, were intimate scenes, some of them, and it was one of those, like, you're touching somebody. And I'm happy to hear that you guys worked that out, and that's probably why it just went so well, because I was thinking about that too as I was watching you guys perform it. And I was thinking about the like, oh, they had to coordinate this very well, because you both felt you were so comfortable with it, as I think I told you, that it made me feel young and in love again. I was just like, it was just such a beautiful scene. But the relationship between you and Alice, and especially, I'm glad you brought up the part about you and the father, because that was such a great scene. And the reason it was such a great scene was because it touched and it brought the connection between dad, and why dad was the way he was. And the way he was because, as he said at first, and you could tell that it's something he never really discussed or brought out to anybody, when he says, well, I used to think like you think, and I wanted to be like you. And then my father, then he beat it
Yeah.
out of me. So that means dad was going through physical abuse, and him going through physical abuse like that to crush his dreams. He didn't realize he was crushing your dreams too. Even though he might not have been doing it physically, he was crushing your dreams emotionally. So, and that's what happens with parents. Sometimes you try to do your best. You're going to be better than when you was raised, but you still can't get it right because you didn't know. So you're working on that. You're trying to figure out, how do I be the best father and do what I need to do, which is best for my son, because I think that what my dad did for me was best for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was such a great thing, and just really good, very, very good production. Who put that on, by the way? That was the Grandview.
Yeah, Grandview Carriage Players through the Parks and Rec department.
Yes, very good. So, okay, before we go, what's your second? Tell us your second one, and then before we close out, this has been a really great interview. Thank you so much for being here. I want you to also tell our guests, if you had to give them any piece of advice in regards to relationships. Okay, so it's a twofold. One, what was your second best role? And two, what would you tell our audience, that if you could tell them anything, a piece of advice, what would that be?
Okay. My second favorite role would probably be, it's a tie between when I did a show called Dearly Departed, a little theater off Broadway, and And my first musical, a funny thing happened on the way to Forum, because I have never done a musical. And so I was so nervous, and I practiced and practiced till my throat was raw. But yeah, it was a really cool opportunity to finally get to do something I had wanted to do since high school and never gotten to do. So I was very thankful for that. And Dearly Departed, I really enjoyed because it was my second show. It was a good part, and I worked with a great cast, and I enjoyed playing a character that was very flawed and an imperfect person with redeeming qualities. And I enjoyed trying to bring humanity to complicated characters. And maybe that's because that's what I do in my professional work. So to answer your second question, the best advice, well, I believe something that I think is important is to actively listen to the people that are closest to you. And what I mean by that is listen without interrupting, be able to actually repeat back what they say to you to make sure you actually heard them, and listen without judgment. And that's hard. It sounds easy, but it's not. It's so much easier to make assumptions about people based off what they share. And I think that it's important to give everybody the benefit of the doubt before you draw to conclusions. You can have those thoughts in the back of your head, but make sure you have all of your facts straight, because I think we all just really want to be accepted by the people that care about us and love us. And the last thing we need is somebody to criticize and judge us if it's not meant with good intention. And because let's be real, we can give ourselves a hard time better than anybody else. So we don't need an echo. So I think my best advice to people is to listen and love each other without judgment, and see the good and say it. Actually say when you see good in people, whether it's that they did a good job in a show, or that they got a really nice promotion at work, or they planted a garden and they're really proud of it. Just like pointing out the little things to make people feel seen.
Good, very good advice for people out there. And I want to once again thank you for being on Let's Talk All Things Art. Mark Tomsic. I will be seeing you, I know, again in this theater seat somewhere. Bye.
Thank you.